Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your Amac podcast, Better for America. And if you haven't yet done so, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a BFA episode. Now, today we have the honor of having with us a United States Marine veteran, a former Lieutenant Colonel, Brooks Tucker. Now, Brooks served all over the world, from Iraq and Afghanistan to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the Western Pacific. And as a result, he's so aware of the tactical challenges faced by our veterans in the field, but he is also someone who continues to give even after active duty. He served as a senior advisor on Veterans Affairs for the U.S. Senate for 5 years, then on the Trump presidential transition team working veteran affairs, and eventually as both assistant secretary for the VA's Office of the Legislative Affairs and acting chief of staff for the Department of Veteran Affairs. So in sum, our guest today is basically as strong on veteran affairs as it really gets, with knowledge and experience to support his lifetime commitment to veterans. Now, our guest today is Colonel Brooks Tucker, and on behalf of AMAC's 2.4 million members, we are so honored and really blessed to have you with us today. Colonel Brooks, thank you for joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good to be here. Pleasure and an honor.
Excellent. Brooks, you are the perfect guest at a time of great tumult in the world because you have really seen it. You've lived in war zones and you understand the stakes. So I do want to start right out of the gate and ask you, what do you make of this Russian invasion of Ukraine? What do you think it means for global security? And where do you think it could end? I'm wondering if you can offer an analysis sort of the conflict that we're watching. And as you see it, where do you think we should be looking right now to somehow, really restore a degree of stability?
Yeah, I think that it's a product, really, Rebecca, of probably several decades of I would say, lack of focus really on the West's part when it comes to Putin's objectives. I don't know whether at the upper reaches, senior leaders in multiple administrations really saw the seriousness of what he was contemplating over many years. I mean, he telegraphed this in some of his incursions in Georgia, where I helped train some of the forces there years ago before his attack in Georgia, Crimea, Chechnya, and Syria, where we, I think, abided by certain tactics and strategy he was employing, and we didn't forcefully respond or clearly respond as the West or as the US. So I think this is a product of a lot of, for lack of a better phrase, appeasement or accommodations to the regime in Russia over the years. We've intertwined ourselves economically with them, politically, diplomatically, and I think we've hoped for the best, but now we're seeing that that has not come to fruition. And Ukraine is the worst example of that.
Yeah, it really is. Your insights are very helpful and valuable. And I want to press you a bit further while we have you here. Given the fast moving turn of events as these conflicts continue to get messier, I do want to ask you how you believe China is thinking about this war. They were one of the countries that abstained from condemnation of Russia's actions at the UN. They neither voted to condemn or to support. And today, as things continue to unfold, do you see China distancing itself from Russia if things get more difficult? Or do you think that they will stand up and support Russia, perhaps using Russia as a foil to justify action against Taiwan? Should we be watching China with greater concern?
Yeah, I think the Chinese situation, and I'm certainly not in a level where I could comment on exactly what's going on with China today. I think they may not be completely clear on how they want to engage or not engage in this, both with us and with Russia. My sense is that they have priorities that are far greater than Russia's. So they are probably being very cautious, I would think, with how they are going to respond, if at all, to do anything to support the Russians in any kind of demonstrative or clear way. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to be saddled with that public relations outcry and that global outcry if they were to really clearly go after helping the Russians at this point. I think the question is, are we at the latter phase of this conflict, or is it going to meander along for weeks and months in some kind of stasis or stalemate? Either way, I don't think they want to be saddled with the reputation of being connected to Russia so closely even though they might be very interested to see Russia's progress, but certainly don't want to see its failure.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, you served in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere, and you watched what happened in the chaotic Afghanistan pullout and how we left these allies behind. So I'm sure that you have strong thoughts on that topic. How do you see what happened and the implications for that set of events?
Well, I think what the program in Afghanistan with the special immigrant visas was designed to do was help these allies of ours who had worked with us for years come back safely. And I will candidly tell you that 3 administrations failed on this program for years: Obama, Trump, and Biden. I don't think they took it seriously. I don't think the State Department put the resources and the leadership into the SIV program, which is what that evacuation was supposed to help. It ended up helping a lot of people who, granted, they were refugees and they needed our assistance, but the vast majority of the folks who we wanted to evacuate from Kabul and from Afghanistan were not the folks we said we wanted to help. They were a lot of people who were in bad straits. They probably got into the airport perimeter and they got on an airplane. I can tell you a quick story. I went down with Team Rubicon, who I volunteer for, to Quantico, which is one of the reception sites. And I remember seeing all these Afghan males come in looking for clothing because a lot of these folks left with the clothes on their back. And virtually none of them spoke English. So they were not special immigrant visa holders who spoke English or who supported the US in any kind of demonstrative way. They were probably kind of carried into that airport facility through the sheer masses of humanity, and they got on an airplane, and now they're in the United States, and they're going to have probably a good life ahead of them. But there's thousands of Afghan patriots who are back in Afghanistan who don't have a way out right now. And I think that evacuation should have started months before it did. I know there was a lot of diplomatic pressure to not evacuate soon because people apparently were worried about the perception of that with the public in Kabul and Afghanistan. But our priorities should have been to get those folks out, and we didn't do it soon enough. We didn't do it well enough, and we're left with sort of a loose end of huge proportions to contend with now.
That's sure the truth. Thank you, Colonel. Thank you so much. I do want to shift to the state of our veterans in this country. Now, you have been a real leader in this area. And today, if you tally all of the veterans in America, like from World War II to present, they're about 7% of our population. But at the same time, 3/4 of AMAC's members have a veteran in their family and or are serving or have served. So many AMAC members are concerned that veterans too often sort of fall through the cracks and are not prioritized here in America and have difficulty with access to hard-earned benefits. So what do you think are the biggest issues facing veterans here at home today? And what can we do to support our veterans that we're not doing? Where are the initiatives that you began under President Trump?
Well, I think the biggest issue, as you put it, Rebecca, is access. And access means different things to different people wherever they live. The vast majority of veterans in the United States do not live in urban or suburban areas. They live in essentially what's clearly defined as a rural location in the United States. They may have to travel half an hour or longer to get to healthcare facilities, whether it's VA or their local community providers. And I think that's the challenge for the VA is it was built in a post-World War II environment where the clusters of populations of veterans were not where they live predominantly today. So the VA is contending with an infrastructure misalignment that is 70 years in the making. And what's happened in the last few years is under President Trump, there was an initiative which is now finally getting off the ground called the Asset Infrastructure Review Commission, which is designed to take hopefully a hard look at where infrastructure needs to be realigned, removed, displaced, and built up to meet a changing demographic and changing geographic location for veterans in this nation. There is a clear move for veterans to seek jobs, the younger veterans, middle-aged veterans who are looking for employment. Those jobs tend to be in states where it's more business friendly for businesses, more tax friendly for retirees or for consumers. And we're seeing that bias in a flow of veterans from the northern tier of the United States to some degree to the southern tier of the United States and somewhat in the southeast and the southwest. The VA knows this is happening. They're trying to adjust to that. But the pressures on the VA are that they have a huge federal workforce, which does not want to shed jobs. It wants to maintain and increase jobs. So there's always been a tension there between the VA healthcare system meeting the needs of veterans and its workforce, which may not be willing to make those kinds of adjustments so quickly. And I think access is going to be a huge issue going forward for all veterans. Is where do they get mental health access, which is a huge challenge without mental health access writ large in the United States. There's a deficit between the supply of workers to do healthcare work and the demand, which is growing. And there's this misalignment with infrastructure and services. So I've said a lot, but that's the big issue: is how do you reposition VA and the private sector to serve veterans when access is challenging?
Wow. Thank you for all that you've done and really all that you're doing and for sharing that. We really appreciate that. Thank you. I do want to ask you, as we watch the state of our defense sector in this country come under scrutiny, there are questions about readiness, social experimentation in the military, operating budgets, modernization, and of course, training. And we're ready for what, are we ready, is my question. Are we ready for what may lie ahead? In other words, are we in a position today, as the world gets more complicated, to manage European and Pacific challenges? And if you could reinforce, reform, or guide some aspect of readiness today, what would you recommend?
Well, I think the problems with readiness are probably most prominent for us if we're looking at China as as they like to say in the Pentagon, the pacing adversary or the peer competitor. But the Chinese have been able to build up a robust naval presence, which it's not clear how they can actually employ that and use that effectively right now. But they're building up a naval presence that they could expand their influence well beyond the near coastal areas of China to perhaps Taiwan and then further out, along with long range missile capabilities and cyber. I think the one thing that struck me about Ukraine, which I think has applications for the threat with China, with Taiwan, and our readiness for that is I know we have robust cyber warfare capabilities. I'm not an expert on it. I don't know how deep and far those go. But if you're China, the last thing you probably want to consider doing right now is trying to invade Taiwan physically. I think that would be a highly costly military operation for them. It would be telegraphed with days, if not weeks, of preparatory activity by their Navy and their amphibious forces and their air forces. I think the next realm, and it's not a new idea for warfare, is probably in the electronic and space and cyber spectrum. So we need to build up a deterrent in the near term, next 5-10 years, with naval forces, I think, and long range strike forces. But the area where I think we really need a lot of emphasis and we need to be very good at it, proficient, is the cyber arena, because that's where you can take down a nation without even having to fire a shot in anger. The Russians were incapable of doing it with Ukraine. The Ukrainian internet is still functioning. Ukrainian TV, the power systems are still largely intact, except if you're in the east or the south, where they've destroyed that grid. But if you're in the middle part of Ukraine or the west, your power is still on to some degree, and you still have a lot of these infrastructure that works. The banking system, those things may be in jeopardy. But long range, I think the Chinese would be wiser to look at how they inflict pain on someone without having to put their troops at risk.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I think we all should be thinking in that direction, or curious to understand how well ready we are in the event of a cyber attack. So thank you, Colonel. I do want to shift back to our veterans quickly for a moment and ask a broader question, not so much about their benefits, but about how we think of our veteran community. If you could describe to a wider audience the commitment that is made by those in uniform, Marines and every other service, what would you say to really drive home the point how much we really owe our veterans?
Well, I think the one thing that service in the military hits home for anyone, whether they're there for one enlistment or 20, 30 years plus, is that it's a team effort. And there's not an issue about the color of someone's skin or whether it's a male or female or where they came from. The people I worked with came from all walks of life, all stratas of economic success or vulnerabilities, and they were committed to the mission at hand. I think that kind of spirit is somewhat lacking sometimes in what we see going on in our Washington world, which is not the world that most Americans live in. So I think that spirit of mission focus and mission accomplishment and service before self is what the military really amplifies for the average American who hasn't served. So I think the best thing we can do as Americans is try to emulate that at the local levels and try to tamp down a lot of this politics that gets in the way of having just a good mission focused success for an effort that sometimes runs astray with politics. And that's what the military to me was, a very singular focused organization.
Oh, well, that's great. Thank you for that. Because I do think that the sense that one gets is that I think for many of us Americans that there's a belief that security just happens, that deterrence just happens, and that readiness happens. But obviously, it's not how it works. Just 1% of the country is on active duty, and we owe them everything. We are only as strong as our commitment to that 1% and to our veterans. So thank you so much for getting that message across so that all Americans can appreciate our veterans and our veteran community.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I do want to thank you for joining us today, for your candor, your insights, and your service to our country. Your record is truly remarkable, and your service for our veterans is really as good as it gets. So thank you for all that you have done, for all that you do. And we all thank you at AMAC, and our membership is forever grateful. Thank you for your time today, and I do hope to have you back again with us soon. And I want to thank everyone out there listening. Thank you for tuning in today. If you haven't downloaded the AMAC News app, go ahead and do that, because you can watch this show and listen to other podcasts, plus track breaking news right there from your smartphone. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button, like, follow, and share wherever you are on social media. Until next time, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thank you for being here. God bless you, and have a great day, everyone.
You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.